All right, well, welcome everybody to Introduction to Energy Star for Homes, HVAC Credentialing. Today I will be your moderator. My name is Brett Little and I'm the Executive Director here at the Green Home Institute. The Green Home Institute is a nonprofit with a mission to empower people to make healthier and more sustainable choices in the renovation and construction of the places we live. Today I'm excited to introduce our main speaker from EPA, Dean Gamble. Dean is a technical manager for EPA's Energy Star Certified Homes program, which he has helped support, define, and implement for over 15 years. With over 1.7 million homes certified, Energy Star is the nation's largest voluntary residential market transformation program, delivering cost-effective, energy-efficient homes while improving their durability, comfort, and quality. And we also have two of the supporting HQEDA organizations on the line who will be talking a little bit about what they do and how they can help, Chris Reynolds and Wes Davis. But with that, Dean, please take it away.
Great, thanks, Brett. Welcome, everyone. It's great to have you join us this afternoon. Let me jump right into our agenda. So we'll start by talking about how the HVAC requirements have evolved in the Energy Star Certified Homes program and why the Energy Star program cares about HVAC anyways. We'll then provide an overview of the HVAC requirements in the current version of the program, followed by who's responsible for completing them. And this will lead to a discussion of the requirements for contractors to be credentialed that Brett was referencing through either ACCA's or Advanced Energy's program. And finally, we'll touch on how Energy Star complements other green programs. And we'll leave plenty of time at the end for questions and answers. Okay, so I mentioned today we're talking about the HVAC-related requirements of the Energy Star Certified Homes program. And this has been quite an evolution since the program started in 1996. So to walk you through that, when version 1 of the program first launched, all you had to do was install tight ducts and use heating and cooling equipment with a higher rated efficiency. And these were just baby steps. Even though it doesn't seem like much today, this was actually a big improvement relative to standard practice 20 years ago. So that kept us going for about 10 years, and then 10 years into the program, with these requirements becoming standard practice, we matured a little bit. And around 2006, with version 2 of our program, we took our first steps towards proper design and installation. But this was addressed with a single footnote, and that referenced ACCA Manual J for loads, ACCA Manual S for sizing, and AHRI-rated equipment. So we were definitely still a bit green behind the ears. Then, starting around 2012, we launched the latest version of our program, version 3. And this version was a big leap forward, as some of you probably already know. We also definitely hit the, what I would call the awkward teenage phase, so not fully matured, but you get the first glimpse of a fully formed set of HVAC requirements. We added a whole house ventilation system, effective kitchen and bathroom exhaust, basic filtration, standardized HVAC design documents based on ACCA Manual J, S, and D, and contractor-led commissioning of the HVAC systems. So there are just two key takeaways from this evolution that I've just walked through. The first is that each version of the program requirements represents another step forward in proper HVAC design and installation. You can see that we've taken this incremental approach. And the second is that version 3 is the first time we've really tried to tackle proper design and installation in earnest, warts and all. Okay, so why is it that we've advanced the HVAC requirements of each version? Why are we caring so much about HVAC in the first place? And the answer is that HVAC is one of the three really critical systems in your house. It's so important because heating and cooling equipment that is high efficiency, properly designed and installed, and combined with a duct system that's insulated and sealed, maintains comfort with less energy. Both things are really important to consumers. In addition, there's the V in HVAC, ventilation, which is missing from almost every home in the United States. And if your HVAC system is missing the V, then all you've got is a hack system, just the H, the A, and the C. And who wants that? That's my Best building science joke for the day, so I hope you enjoyed that. The ventilation system is really important, though, because it removes low-quality air, it automatically provides outdoor air, and it filters contaminants to improve indoor air quality. And the third key feature is reduced safety and air quality risks from combustion appliances. So these are really key parts to any home. They're central to the Energy Star program, and we don't think there's any consumer that would not want these things in their new house. So what are we trying to avoid with these sorts of requirements? Well, the first is poorly installed ducts. I'm sure you've never seen a duct system that is this bad, but it can happen. This is a real photograph of a real duct system. It's not just mocked up for demonstration purposes. And ducts like this will reduce the amount of airflow through them and possibly make the HVAC fan work even harder. So that's bad all around. What else are we trying to avoid? Pressure imbalances. So does your bedroom ever feel stuffy at night when you close the door, even when the HVAC system is on? That happens when there's no pathway for the heated or cooled air to get from your bedroom back to the HVAC system. And in this photograph, the only path was underneath the door. And so what do we see? The carpet under the door was actually acting as an air filter because that was the only path for the air to return to the HVAC system, and it left behind that strip of dust and dirt. We definitely don't want to see that in Energy Star homes and have uncomfortable bedrooms. Another thing we're avoiding is recirculating kitchen exhaust fans. So in this photo, rather than exhausting air from the stove to the outside, the fan is just blowing it directly in your face. And that's about the worst possible place for cooking byproducts like oils and combustion gases. And finally, there's ample evidence that other defects occur during installation of the HVAC system. These are less visible than a recirculating range hood, but they're just as important. So what kind of defects are we talking about? The first is that the HVAC systems often have improper airflow. And another key defect is improper refrigerant charge. So to help understand these defects, it helps to walk through the basic operation of an air conditioning system. So here we have a very fancy one. As you can tell, it has a refrigerant loop. Half of it is in the house and half of it is outside the house. And refrigerant goes round and round in that closed loop. And on each side, we also have a fan. So a normal operation of an air conditioner, down there at number 1, first, the air handler fan blows warm indoor air over a coil that contains cold refrigerant. Second, the heat is transferred from the warm air to the cold refrigerant. The air cools down and circulates back to the house. That's great. That's what you're paying for after all. And at the same time, the refrigerant warms up and it leaves the home. Third, the compressor outside compresses the refrigerant, which makes it even warmer, and the big condenser fan outside blows relatively cool outdoor air over the super hot refrigerant line. Fourth, heat is transferred from the very hot refrigerant to the relatively cool outdoor air. This cools off the refrigerant, which is then pumped back inside the home, ready for another cycle. So the reason it's important to walk through this is that when you strip away all the bells and whistles, this is the heart of the air conditioner. And the two key components that I think you can imagine affect performance is the amount of refrigerant in that line and how much air is blowing across those refrigerant lines on the inside and the outside. And because these are two key characteristics, you might guess that because you're paying thousands of dollars for a brand new air conditioning system, these would be spot on in every case. But in reality, that's not true. In fact, defects with these two parameters are commonplace. In fact, multiple studies have shown that the average airflow can be way off of the design. So one study showed that the average airflow was 20% below the target. Another showed the airflow was 14% below design. Two other studies were showing a huge range in the amount of airflow per ton of air conditioning that you're buying. And one showed improper airflow in 44% of systems. So that's on the airflow side. And on the refrigerant side, multiple studies have shown that the amount of refrigerant can be off, and that can be in between 57 and 82% of systems. It's almost unbelievable. In fact, there have been so many studies about HVAC installation defects that there have been studies just to summarize all the other studies that have been done. So this has been something that has been known for a while to the building science community, but it's not something that has been effectively tackled to date. Okay, so in short, why does Energy Star care about HVAC? It's because a properly designed and installed HVAC system helps maintain comfort with less energy, it improves your indoor air quality, and it reduces homeowner risk. So there's a lot of benefits to getting this system right. Plus, because design and installation defects are the norm rather than the exception, this is an area that deserves attention. Okay, so that was a lot of context. With that, let's run through the HVAC requirements in the current version of the Energy Star program. So there are two key documents that contain all of these requirements. The first is the HVAC design report. It's a very important document, and as the name suggests, this contains all of the items that the HVAC designer needs to complete. It's divided into 5 sections: the design overview, the whole house mechanical ventilation design, the room-by-room heating and cooling loads, the heating and cooling equipment selection, and the duct design. Even if you're not an HVAC designer, and we probably have fewer designers on than builders and architects and consultants, even without being a designer yourself, it's really helpful to understand the basic requirements in each of these sections. This really helps demystify, I think, the perception about what our program requirements contain. So the first section of the HVAC design report contains the design overview. It contains 6 pretty straightforward items, including things like the designer's name and company, the date of the design, and which house plan or plans the design is for. This is basic, but actually really important information. Now let's turn our attention to the second section, the whole house mechanical ventilation design. This is the device that automatically brings that fresh air into every Energy Star home, and there are 5 subsections about this equipment. The first is the airflow of the ventilation system. This is probably the most important because you don't want to bring in too little outdoor air or bring in too much outdoor air. The second subsection covers the ventilation system type and its controls. The third covers the sound rating of the ventilation fan. You don't want the equipment to be so loud that the homeowners turn it off. The fourth addresses its efficiency, because you don't want to spend too much money bringing this fresh air in. And for ventilation systems that have a designated air inlet, there are some spacing requirements that have to be met, which is covered in the last subsection. For example, you don't want your air inlet for your fresh air system to be located in the garage. That wouldn't be very logical. So the key takeaways are that the ventilation design can be documented in one section right on the design report, and that completing these sections will help the designer meet the ventilation requirements of the Energy Star program, and increasingly, these are requirements that are built right into code. So even though Energy Star was ahead of the curve, actually more and more new homes that are being constructed in states have to meet this regardless of whether they're doing Energy Star or not. The third section is for documenting room-by-room heating and cooling loads. So why is this important? This calculation tells the designer how much heat the house gains in the summer and how much heat it loses in the winter. And knowing this number is really important. It makes it possible to pick AC equipment that can remove all that heat in the summer, and a heating system like a furnace that can add all that heat back in the winter. To calculate the heating and cooling load, the designer needs to know all of the architectural and energy efficiency characteristics of the house. So there are basic ones like floor area, window area, number of bedrooms, insulation R values, and there are more advanced ones like the window U value and solar heat gain coefficient, the installation grade, the target infiltration rate, the duct leakage rate, the mechanical ventilation rate. This list goes on and on. And if these inputs are wrong for the designer, then the resulting heating and cooling loads will also be wrong. So this is definitely an example of that phrase, garbage in, garbage out. If you're not putting into your load calculations what's actually going to be built, then your loads that you're calculating won't be correct. Now what's interesting about this list is that the home energy rater needs every single one of these inputs too. In fact, there's an incredible overlap between the inputs that a rater needs to do hers rating for a house and those that an HVAC designer needs. And what this means is that a rater can review the HVAC design report for just the key inputs to make sure that they match the home that was actually built. This helps ensure that the heating cooling load is in the right ballpark, and it's a critical review, yet it's rarely ever done except on Energy Star homes. So this is not something that most raters are paying attention to, and it's a missed opportunity. Okay, let's move on. The fourth of 5 sections is for documenting your heating and cooling equipment selection. This may look like a lot of information at first, but different sections need to be filled out depending on whether the home has an air conditioner, heat pump, or a furnace. So the designer is rarely going to have to fill out all the fields for any one home. And the key part of this section is that the designer demonstrates that the selected equipment is not too big or too small compared to the heating and cooling loads. The fifth and final section for documenting is for documenting the basics of the duct design. And as the earlier photo showed, even if you have great HVAC equipment, if you pair it with a bad duct system, it's going to have a big impact on performance. Now, the absolute best news about the HVAC design report is that it can be automatically completed and printed out by RightSoft, one of the most commonly used HVAC design programs. And this is actually a really big deal. It means that once the designer finishes their design using the HVAC design software, they can produce the completed ENERGY STAR HVAC design report with literally the press of a button. And 2 other popular programs, Elite's RHVAC and FSEC's Energy Gauge, are working on adding this feature too. So that's it for design. 5 key sections that give you great insight into the HVAC design that's been completed for an ENERGY STAR home. If you're working on any project with new construction, this would be a huge value add to make sure that these assumptions are pretty much in line with the home being built. Now let's move on to the second key document, the HVAC commissioning checklist. As the name suggests, this contains all of the items that the HVAC commissioning contractor needs to complete, and relative to the HVAC design report, it's actually pretty straightforward. This checklist is divided into 4 sections: the commissioning overview, the refrigerant charge, the indoor HVAC fan airflow, and air balancing of supply registers and return grills. So the commissioning overview is analogous to the design overview on the HVAC design report, containing pretty straightforward, high-level project information. The refrigerant charge section addresses one of those 2 key installation defects we mentioned earlier. This section walks the contractor through the steps of ensuring that the refrigerant charge is correct. The third section addresses the other common defect we discussed, proper airflow. And we provide some great informational videos and resources to help contractors do this properly. Actually, just forwarded this to a partner today. They were looking to dig that up because it was so helpful. So I definitely encourage you to check these out after the webinar if you're interested in learning more. And the fourth and final section of the HVAC commissioning checklist is air balancing of registers and grills. Now, this is a key commissioning step, but in the current program, it's recommended rather than required. And that's because there are a number of precursors that have to be done right for balancing to work. First, the ducts have to be properly designed. Second, a strategy for balancing has to be selected, either dampers or right-sized duct runs. Third, the ducts have to be installed according to the design, which is surprisingly uncommon. And fourth, the contractor has to have the knowledge and skills to measure the airflows and balance the system. Once all these precursors are in place, then the system can be successfully balanced. So we've made this commissioning task a recommendation rather than a requirement, but we continue to invest in these precursors. Okay, so those are the key HVAC design and commissioning requirements in the program. Not so bad, right? The HVAC design report requires the designer to document key parts of their work. The HVAC commissioning checklist requires the contractor to document key aspects of field commissioning. And finally, while we won't go over this in detail, the rater design review checklist and the rater field checklist require the home energy rater to verify key parts of these first 2 documents. Okay, so now you have a sense of what the requirements are. Let's take a look at where in the certification process they get completed. So let's start with the designers. As a designer, first you'll obtain the relevant plan, options, efficiency features from the builder, or even possibly directly from the home energy rater. Second, you'll decide to do either a site-specific design or a group design. Next, you'll design the ventilation system, perform those room-by-room load calculations we talked about, select heating and cooling equipment, and design the duct system. And once the design is complete, you just fill out the HVAC design report for each system design, and you hand it over to the builder or the HVAC contractor that's going to install the equipment, and to the home energy rater. And this can be done once per system design. And then your work is done. So this can be completed before construction of the home even begins. And if you're in a production environment where the same house is going to be built more than once with the same HVAC system, the designer can complete this process just a single time, and their work can be reused for subsequent homes. So that can really cut down on the paperwork that's needed. Now let's discuss the process for the contractor. First, you'll need to become credentialed to work on ENERGY STAR certified homes. We'll talk more about what this means in the next section. To properly commission a system, you'll need some key design parameters from the HVAC design report. So the contractor will need to coordinate with the designer or the builder to get that information. The home is then constructed and the HVAC system is installed. And once that happens and the HVAC system is started up, you can commission it and complete the HVAC commissioning checklist. Remember that checking the refrigerant charge and the HVAC fan airflow is mandatory, while testing and balancing room-by-room airflows is highly recommended but not required. Finally, you can retain the completed checklist in-house unless the builder, the home energy rater, or the HVAC oversight organization requests it. And finally, let's take a quick look at the rater's role with regards to the HVAC system. During the design stage as a rater, you'll collect the completed HVAC design report from the designer. Again, in a production environment, you might already have this documentation if the same house plan is being built multiple times. You'll compare key inputs on the report to the energy model you created to verify the design is reflective of the actual home that's going to be built. And in doing this review, you can complete the rater design review checklist. After construction begins on the house, you'll be able to complete the rater field checklist, which verifies key aspects of the actual installed heating and cooling equipment, the duct system, and the ventilation equipment. Prior to final inspection, the HVAC contractor will complete the commissioning checklist, and as a rater, you're permitted but not required to collect this commissioning checklist for the home to be certified. And that's it. Hopefully this helps you visualize the role that each of these key actors are playing. Now let's move on to a key component of the ENERGY STAR program, which I just alluded to on the on one of the prior slides, the HVAC Credential. So as you can probably tell by now, the requirements of the current program represented a huge step forward in terms of HVAC design and installation. And at the time those requirements were being developed back in 2012, not all of the HVAC-related parameters could be easily third-party verified by raters. So while a rater, for example, could independently verify how leaky the ducts were, they had been doing that for over 10 years, some of the tasks, like refrigerant charge testing, were beyond the capabilities of the typical rater. And this was true for a variety of reasons, and that remains true today. So to bring an added measure of oversight to the program, we require HVAC contractors to be credentialed by an HVAC Quality Install Training and Oversight Organization, also known as an HQITO. HVAC companies earn the credential on an annual basis. HQITOs vet contractors on the front end. Contractors must demonstrate that they have the proper procedures in place to meet our requirements. In addition, the HQITOs can assist on the back end if performance issues arise with the contractors. The HQITO can help review claims and can take disciplinary action with the contractor as needed. And there are, as you might guess, currently 2 national HQITOs, which are ACCA and Advanced Energy. That's why we're going to have them present some information on their programs in just a few minutes. Finally, before I wrap up, I just want to highlight how ENERGY STAR complements other green programs. Brett thought you'd be particularly interested in this component. So first off is EPA's Indoor Air Plus program. You could say that ENERGY STAR offers enhanced IAQ protection, and if you want to go even further and include a complete indoor air quality package with only a little bit more effort, then this is the program for you. Indoor Air Plus requires ENERGY STAR as a prerequisite, So that's how it ties in, and then it builds upon it by adding important protections like radon control, reduction of volatile organic compounds, and pest management. So for more information, you can visit the link on this slide. For next-gen home building, meet DOE's Zero Energy Ready Homes program, and I think you've already had a webinar on this. So this requires ENERGY STAR and Indoor Air Plus as a prerequisite. So again, ENERGY STAR is baked in. It then adds additional efficiency, thermal enclosure, HVAC and water efficiency components, plus renewable ready design features. So it's easier to add renewable energy in the future to the home. And I've included a link for that if you want to learn more. And finally, there's LEED for Homes, which is at version 4 right now. That's a more expansive green program, and ENERGY STAR fully or partially satisfies a number of prerequisites. You can see those listed here in minimum energy performance, whole house mechanical ventilation, local exhaust, and plus you can get points for the startup credentialing process that we require, the bedroom pressure balancing that I showed the photograph of the dirty carpet. You get 1 point for having pressure balancing, plus many of the efficiency features used to meet the ENERGY STAR performance target also earn points in the EA section. And if you do Indoor Air Plus on top of that, that satisfies a bunch of other things. Prerequisites for combustion venting, garage pollutant protection, radon-resistant construction, air filtering, plus you get points for low-emitting materials, contaminant control, enhanced combustion venting, enhanced garage pollutant protection. So there's a lot of value to doing ENERGY STAR plus Indoor Air Plus if you're pursuing LEED for Homes. And I've included the link to those credits in case you're just getting familiar with that, but I think you probably are already quite familiar with the program. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up for now, and I'm going to turn it over to Wes Davis with ACCA. He is the program administrator for their oversight program for HVAC contractors, and he's going to tell you a little bit more about what they can do.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I am Wes Davis. And we are ACCA, Air Conditioning Contractors of America. We're one of the sponsors of the HVAC Oversight Organization. And our mission is to recognize quality contractors and quality installations. And we do that, we started that primarily in support of ENERGY STAR. We provide that or perform that function for ENERGY STAR for all HVAC professionals. I mentioned the ACCA, which is a trade association, but membership in that trade association is not required. In fact, probably about half of the credentialed contractors we have are not ACCA members. One of the things that we do require, though, is that we verify their licenses, insurance, also require them to go through an orientation, very similar to what Dean just provided, giving an overview of the ENERGY STAR program, and then they have to sign a participation agreement acknowledging that they will comply with the requirements of the program. We do perform an annual renewal to confirm the requirements are met, and in the instance when there is a problem, we investigate the issue, try and get that resolved with the contractor and the rater in the field, and if there's a finding of non-conformance or non-compliance, we do take disciplinary action against that contractor. That's been the focus of our mission, that first bullet, the accrediting HVAC professionals and keeping them operating at a good pace. One of the things we're focusing on now is the second part, the quality installation. Dean mentioned raters and their role in ENERGY STAR certified homes. And as the HVAC requirements became more at the forefront and more of those elements were required to be evaluated, a great deal of raters stepped in and really took the bit in their teeth and ran with it. But there are some raters that are struggling with help evaluating those HVAC requirements, and so we're looking at a way that we can help in that front. To provide some history, 13 years ago, our board started an effort to move toward a contractor accreditation. The next step was to develop a quality installation standard, and after that, we were requested by some utilities to develop some protocols so that others could evaluate those same installations. And then in 2011, Energy Star asked ACCA to participate in the credentialing program, and so we did. And we took some steps then to start moving to expand that. And in 2013, we developed our residential service installation effort, more for existing homes, and then became an Energy Star verified installation program sponsor shortly after that. The basis for the evaluation, similar to what Energy Star has, is it's based on the ACCA 5 quality installation standards. So looking at an HVAC system, how do you know it meets the requirements? We have a very objective, measurable set of metrics that need to be evaluated, performance requirements, documentation, et cetera. I mentioned the ACCA 9 verification protocols, and in that document is a set of checklists. And these mirror a lot of the requirements that are Energy Star required. What we found is that checklists are a real pain to get filled out. And so we've moved toward a mobile app that captures that information more easily. In the supply house the other day, and people coming in to get parts or material didn't have necessarily a list. They pull out their phone and they had a picture there of a fan motor they need to replace. And so with smart devices becoming ubiquitous, we are moving toward moving that checklist into a platform that's supported by a mobile device. We'll have a web browser version as well as Android and Apple. You can use this tool online, or if you're in an area with no internet service, you can use it offline. And there's some immediate feedback, or you can wait till the very end of the project and get feedback on what may need to be fixed. One of the other benefits to the mobile app is there's nothing else to buy. This tool is available to our accredited contractors, and while this may not seem apparent, there are a number of devices that are used in different efforts to evaluate an HVAC systems installation. And so buying certain tools to demonstrate compliance is sometimes a requirement of those efforts. Our system captures the same information that these tools provide, or you can take that same information and load it onto the app, but there is no requirement to buy any additional tools. Understanding that there are some contractors who could use some assistance either on the design or the installation, we've come up with some national scalable training that's available to people that's offered either in person, come to ACCA and get a class. We'll send an instructor to an area that has a large enough pool of students. As I mentioned, it's scalable, it's online. You can also, there are some people who prefer offline, viewing it via DVD. That was focused on the design. This is focused on the installation. Similar process. You get a workbook, you watch the online videos, you follow along, test at the end if you so desire to demonstrate the knowledge gained and earn a certificate. And these are available to members and non-members alike. So that's our mission moving forward. We want to continue to look at contractors and ensure that they have the necessary requirements to provide quality installation, in addition to having proper procedures so that they can verify their work. And we're moving forward to verify quality installations in the field. And now, Chris Reynolds, who's a licensed HVAC contractor, building science consultant and trainer. He's got years of experience in the field and supports his members by performing job reviews and feedback. Chris?
Thank you, Wes. Advanced Energy's Energy Star version 3 online training course is intended for professionals responsible for installing HVAC systems in Energy Star new homes. Over the past 6 years, we've credentialed hundreds of contractors who have completed our training, and they demonstrate their competency to work with Energy Star builders. In turn, we promote our members on our website via a search tool for builders and Energy Star program sponsors. We also highlight our contractors in quarterly newsletters and national presentations. A little bit about us. We are a nonprofit energy consulting firm. We work with electric utilities, government, and a wide variety of public and private organizations in the residential, commercial, and industrial, solar, motors and drives, and electric vehicle markets. Our customized services include research, testing, training, consulting, and program design. And from our experience in these areas, we funneled that knowledge into our HVAC program for new homes and participate in consulting with our contractors and evaluation whenever necessary. Our team, although there's several of us, the day-to-day operations are by three primary individuals. Wendy Berkland, the program manager, Terry Bowling, who is our primary admin staff. She handles program questions like renewals and getting you signed up in the system for training, and myself, who answers all technical questions and performs the job reviews. Once a contractor has completed their online application and submitted payment, they're given a password to our online management system. And this tracks your training progress through the different courses. It has all the resources you need to take the tests, and it automatically notifies us when they have completed everything. If an individual does have a problem with their computer, we also have an IT department on standby that can assist them if they have any questions or concerns. And one of the examples of resources that we provide to our contractors is this is the answer to our #1 asked question: when should we give you our checklists? So by following the flow chart from left to right, they can see that they bid and sell the job. They have your pre-con meeting, and you meet with the rater, at which time you should submit to us the checklists for the design. And then after the installation and the startup are completed, the commissioning checklist should then be submitted to us. And throughout the entire process, we offer any help that we can via email or phone. And I'll turn it back over to Brett.
Thanks, Chris. And just real quick, we're going to go through a few more of a deeper dive into especially the LEED and some of the other green building programs before we wrap up. But as we're going through that, feel free to drop in your questions, comments, but we got plenty of time for more of a conversation here. So this is a bit of so Dean did a great job of kind of giving us a high-level overview. Here's a deeper dive into the LEED for Homes version 4 manual, looking at the energy and atmosphere prerequisite on the minimum energy performance. You will see this prerequisite applies to homes and multifamily mid-rise, but in regards to Energy Star version 3, we are primarily looking at single-family homes. We're looking at renovations, and we're looking at anything up to 5-story multifamily that is permitted under the Energy Star 3 program. And the recent changes, Energy Star has moved into the direction to allowing centralized HVAC systems now in up to 5-story multifamily mixed-use buildings to follow their protocol. Before it didn't. It was more focused on decentralized systems than centralized systems. But anyway, so here's just a quick snapshot of the workbook here. You can see that you have to meet all of the requirements of the Energy Star version 3 rating system, which includes submitting all the documentation that we just referenced here before. But I do want to make it very crystal clear that certification under Energy Star version 3 at this point in LEED version 4 homes is not required. It doesn't have to go through the formal certification. We typically say if you're going through all of that work, why not do it? But at the end of the day, it is not a requirement. If you're still pursuing Lead for Homes 2008, for the few of you who will be doing that for several years, Energy Star version 3 certification is a great way to skip the whole durability piece and pick up an extra ID credit in the Lead 2008 program, but you do have to go through the full-blown certification if you want to do that. So moving on to this credit that exists under Energy and Atmosphere, HVAC Startup Credentialing. This is a credit that exists both in prescriptive and performance pathway. It's available no matter which pathway you're taking. This is where if your heating and cooling contractor does decide to work with one of these organizations, ACCA or Advanced Energy, and become credentialed, there are many benefits to this. Obviously, the number one benefit we argue is just simply having a high-performance HVAC contractor on your team who's been trained and credentialed to know what they're doing to service a project like this. But secondary, you can snag an extra point in the rating system and give you the assurance that the contractor that you're hiring knows what they're doing, has been trained on these various checklists and processes. Not to mention, well, I was going to say, if you're just in the registration stage now, this is a great time when you're bidding to contractors to put in your bids that you prefer a contractor like this for your LEED or green building project, and or require it. And then if you have a contractor that you do work with, and we can pull Chris or Wes here at the end as a question, but if you have a contractor that you do work with, we highly recommend that you get them in touch with one of these organizations now to get credentialed before the projects get registered. And then Dean did a great job of showing this, but again, it's just in the Indoor Environmental Quality section. Indoor Air Plus certification can knock out several of these prerequisites and snag you a few points, but you will be required to certify under Energy Star. You can't just meet the requirements of it. You actually have to get the certification to use the Indoor Air Plus and pick up those credits under Lead for Homes. Moving on into enterprise green communities, same thing here, single family, attached or detached, new or renovations, all the way up to 5-story multifamily, are based on the Energy Star program. So again, in this case, what's different from LEED here is that they actually do require full-blown certification to be submitted for your enterprise green community certification. So make sure you're aware that we're looking for full certification on that program. And I also wanted to touch base on the Passive House program, which Passive House International US, or Passive House US, has aligned itself with Energy Star 3 and the DOE Zero Energy program. So all of these, your HVAC contractor on a Feeis project, US House, must submit each of those items. So we've got some questions rolling in. We've got more time for some questions. Before we get to those questions, just real quick, for those of you listening live, check your email or spam for details to get your CEUs. Take the survey at the end of the course. In this case, actually, we're going to be giving you your GBCI number, so you don't have to self-report it, or you have to self-report it, but you'll be getting the number, and we'll be reporting your AIA credentials. Those of you listening on demand, make sure you get the 80% passing rate on the 10-question quiz to get your CEUs. And a huge thanks to all of our sponsors who allow us to do what we do: Panasonic, Niagara Conservation, Sun Intuitive Self-Tinting Glass, and Build Equinox, CERV. We couldn't do it without them. We couldn't do it without our members and our board and everybody. So thanks for tuning in. And for those of you Feeis folks, make sure to screen capture this here in the next 5 seconds. I'll pull it back up here in a little bit. Make sure to do your self-report with the code here at the bottom, and that will be sent out to you through email as well. So like I said, we've got some time for questions. I do see a specific question had rolled in a little bit early, so Dean, I'll kick it your way here, and let me make sure I've got the right one pulled up. Give me a second. So the question is, when using PTAX, the refrigerant charge is set at the factory and no line sets are field installed. Can the HVAC contractor use line pressures provided by the manufacturer?
Yep, good question. In all likelihood, you're going to be exempt. So I just want to be clear about this because it's a little bit more in the weeds than I was going to cover today. But the HVAC commissioning checklist is really intended to cover the most popular, kind of most common equipment types for now, as we take our first, foray into commissioning. So to be more specific, the checklist, the commissioning checklist applies to split air conditioners, unitary air conditioners, air source heat pumps, and geothermal heat pumps up to 65 kBTUH with forced air distribution systems, meaning ducts, and to furnaces up to 225 kBTU with ducts. And so, all the PTACs I can think of are not going to be attached to a distribution system and would be exempted from completing the HVAC commissioning checklist. So hopefully that answers the question. That certainly doesn't mean that we don't encourage them to be commissioned, but you're right, in the case of PTACs, there's not an open refrigerant line where you're typically adding or removing refrigerant during the commissioning and startup process.
Great, looks like that helps a lot. Thanks, Dean. Wes, Chris, if you had anything else to add, I could keep it open for a second, or you can
Actually, let me throw something else out, Brett, while we're seeing if any other questions come in. You were trying to distinguish for the LEED requirements between kind of meeting the requirements versus officially certifying the home under ENERGY STAR. And so I just want to I want to clarify one point about that, because we do get some partner confusion. I know that, LEED has fees associated with officially certifying and registering projects. The ENERGY STAR certification itself is free, and so, if you're actually doing the requirements and having the rater make sure that the requirements have been met, then there's no additional cost and very little process associated with officially earning the label itself. The rater who does that work is essentially just submitting that to the ResNet registry through the software that they use to model the home in the first place, and that enables them to label the house. No fee sort of associated with that from EPA. So we'd certainly encourage partners to go all the way if they're trying to meet the requirements anyway and actually get the label. It adds to the branding power and, demonstrates to the consumer that they've really met all of the requirements.
Thanks, Dean. Yeah, very helpful. I agree with that. As we're waiting for some more questions to roll in here, one of the things I've noticed on the checklist is those who might be using or avoiding ducts, and especially maybe using more mini-split type applications. Is there an inherent benefit to that in regards to the amount of things that have to be checked, the amount of paperwork that has to be done? It seems to be that it, based on a review of it, there might be less work that has to do if those kinds of systems are selected.
Yeah, it cuts both ways. So at the moment, this actually is a good tie into the last question about PTACs. We really are just addressing the most common system types, and so mini splits are exempted from the commissioning requirements as well, which means that they would be technically exempted from the requirement to use a credentialed contractor. So it's more from practical concerns than anything else that they're not encompassed by the program requirements today. Certainly in the future, when we revise the program requirements, we'll look to see if we can expand that to include mini splits, because it's not, I do like mini splits a lot, and they offer some advantages that other equipment types can't offer, but they're also not foolproof, and you can actually, install a mini split incorrectly or design it incorrectly and still not get great performance. So generally speaking, it's still a niche product. It's increasingly being looked at by builders. I think it's a really exciting equipment class, and at the moment you get exempted from some of our paperwork, but we still certainly encourage people to be using well-qualified designers and installers for that.
So I just wanted to just make sure to reiterate, you're saying those using mini split systems actually don't even need the credentialed contractor to get the certification?
Right, that's true. Today it's an exempted equipment type, and so because it's exempted as equipment class, just like PTACs without distribution systems are exempted, there aren't requirements that have to be satisfied on the commissioning checklist, and therefore you don't need a credentialed contractor. So that's true, but we certainly encourage people to still consider using a credentialed contractor, and more importantly, making sure that you're working with a contractor that sort of has some experience with these and knows what they're doing, because despite, I think, some impressions of them, they're not 100% foolproof.
So the question now, the next one is when the HVAC designer is not the HVAC installer, does the designer need Energy Star certification, or is that just the installer?
That's a great question, too. So right now, it's only a credential requirement for the installer. So it's, as we've rolled out the program and learned more and more about the business of designing and installing HVAC systems, we understand that oftentimes the design will be done by one party and the installation will be done by a different party. And they are different skill sets, so there's reasons for that happening beyond just, the convenience factor of it. So right now, the designer doesn't have to earn any particular credential to satisfy their part of the program. I think both Advanced Energy and ACCA offer, information and education and training that's geared not just to the installers but to the designers. And so I think there's certainly going to be potential value from being credentialed, even if you're a designer, but it's not a mandatory requirement for the program.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, Chris or Wes, if one of you wanted to chime in on just some of that value of having the designer go through one of these trainings. Sounds like you want to give it a shot, Wes. Maybe not.
I'm debating. No, I think that having a good designer is necessary. Being walked through manuals J, D, and S, but currently, defining what that credential would look like is challenging. I think there's some extremely well-educated folks out there with a lot of letters after their name who would be challenged to design a good system, and then folks who maybe didn't do so well in school, but they intuitively understand mechanical systems and layouts, and with the assistance of very good tools, software, they're able to translate that into a good system. So it's a challenge, and Energy Star is, at this point, not requiring that to be a credential. I think that, at this point is a good and fair way to do things.
Chris, did you have anything to add?
Well, sure. I mean, we push for the designer credential a whole lot. I mean, even if they're not installing it, they need to get it because, I mean, one specific problem we've had is where an engineer will do the design and then they bring in the credentialed contractor. Well, the design doesn't actually meet Energy Star requirements. And to meet code, the HVAC contractor has to design it per the engineer specs, and the installing contractor gets their feet held to the fire. So it gets a little sticky, but we would always, having some sort of a design credential is definitely something we would try to do in the future.
Yeah, that makes a good point. I mean, we work with a lot of designers, architects. Do you see any of these folks? I mean, you mentioned engineers, but do you see any of these folks also designing the HVAC system on residential projects, or do you see more of that happening now?
Slowly, but it's pretty, I mean, for residential stuff, it's pretty rare. It's mainly in like the multifamily stuff we're having the designer problem.
Great, thanks. Dean, you did a fantastic job of breaking down LEED. There was a question, I don't know how familiar you are with Enterprise Green Communities program, but do you know of any other, besides the required certification, do you see any other benefits of pursuing Energy Star in related to some of the requirements or credits in that program?
Shoot, yeah, I should have included a slide on that. I am not as familiar with the details of how the program overlays with Energy Star. We certainly coordinate closely with that program, and it's a great program as well. So I'm a little remiss in not including a slide on that. So I'd encourage the partner that's asking that to dive into that on their website, and if they can't get the answer that they're looking for, to follow up with me.
All right, great, thanks. Well, we've still got a little bit of time for questions here. We, from our perspective and what we experienced several years ago when we helped administer some of these trainings, we probably had about 150 over the course of like a couple months and several courses, contractors that we came in touch with, and we obviously teach to them on the general requirements of submitting the checklist in the program. But then we dived into other conversations about, you know, advanced heating and cooling system strategies. We dived into the concept of sealing ducts and what MERV filters are. And there were a lot of contractors I was very surprised to, you know, came back saying they didn't know what some of these basic things are, like what MERV filters were, what it meant. So I was very surprised by that, and also, you know, I found that this training and this credential had kind of, you know, maybe raised the bar a little bit for those who went through it. Do you all see any of that happening on your end, where, you know, even if maybe they're not doing Energy Star 3 projects, there are other benefits to having this credential to kind of set the contractors apart and show that they're, you know, a high-performance HVAC contractor?
Yeah, absolutely, from our end. I mean, we didn't even really start the conversation on HVAC design and commissioning until 2012, which is kind of amazing, because that was, you know, 15 years into our program. So for the last 5 years, we've had so many conversations with designers and contractors and understanding their world, the constraints that they're operating under, and the sort of, in the past, the lack of, like you were referring to, setting a bar that they had to perform to. So we've seen designers really make some great strides and contractors make great strides in the last 5 years. And I think the credential is one way they can help educate themselves on these fundamental design and installation components. And increasingly, you know, these are being enforced by code. So one of the things I was alluding to is that even though this is a big step forward for Energy Star, these requirements really aren't sort of the state of the art. They're really just the bare minimum you should be doing to make sure the system is operating as expected. A lot of this stuff is actually embedded directly in the residential codes. And so I think it's been helpful to draw the connection between our requirements and the code requirements, and set the expectation for these professionals that this is sort of the bar that they're increasingly going to be held to going forward.
Great, thanks. Chris, Wes, I mean, before we close off here, I don't see any other questions. Did you have anything else you wanted to add, or you know, let us know any kind of lessons learned in the field, or just chime in and again just give us where people can find out more information if they want to reach out? And Wes, I'll start with you.
Well, thanks for inviting us. Glad to participate in this presentation. Lessons learned, I would say, is don't be afraid to hold your contractor's feet to the fire, and if you need assistance, reach out to myself or Chris. I think we're here to help and provide assistance to ensure that the Energy Star and or whatever other program requirements are met.
Sure, I'd like to add, yeah, you know, contractors, normally the ones that are the most successful for us are the ones that actually call and ask questions. A lot of guys just assume certain things are okay, and it ends up getting them in trouble. So it's definitely just taking ego out of it and, you know, asking for help. That's what we're here for.
All right, well, I want to thank Dean Gamble for speaking, Bryce Lang over at the EPA as well for helping set this up, Wes Davis with ACCA, and Chris Reynolds with Advanced Energy. Dean, just real quick, as we close up, where can people go to get more information?
We have a few key links on this last slide. So energystar.gov/newhomespartners is a great place to start for our main technical requirements. My contact information is down there below by email, as well as our general inbox email address. So definitely don't hesitate to reach out. We talk with partners all the time across the country and help guide them along the way to certification.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again, everybody. We're going to go ahead and close. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you at the next session. Take care.
Thanks, Brett.